Hey everyone, today we have Nick Moran, a full-time drummer and a Musician Institute graduate. Nick has played multiple instruments for over 11 years. He's a drummer for the Rock and Roll Experience, also known as RNRX, with the residency at the Silver Legacy Casino in Reno, Nevada. He has recently released an EP with Atticus Finch called View from Higher Ground. He is now the music director at Union Church, located in Monterey Park. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me. This is crazy.
I know, dude. I haven't seen you in such a long time. It's great to see you.
Yeah, so me and Andrew, short story, used to live together. And it's been,
I remember.
What, like a year now, pretty much. I think I was out in September.
Yeah, it's probably been a year and some months.
Change.
Yeah. But it's great to see you. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, dude. It's a pleasure having you here today. Ultimately, we just want to say thank you. And also, before anything else, we just want to say, go Dodgers.
Let's go, though.
We are going to take it this year.
We have to take it this year. This year is LA's year. You know why? Because the Lakers won, which is a big W. I'm a Lakers fan. Are you a Lakers fan?
I see the hat. I got you. Yeah.
And then the Dodgers, it's hard being a Dodger fan. They've let us down the past 3 years.
You got to manage expectations, guys. Keep
That's
them
funny.
low.
I was watching. Have you seen Moneyball?
Yes.
It's funny that Brad Pitt in the movie says, like, it doesn't matter how many records you break. It doesn't matter, like if you have the best players, everyone always remembers the last game.
Facts.
And that feels like the Dodgers every year. It's like, bro, we lost.
Right.
It's funny because you ask people like, hey, who won the World Series the last year? Maybe some people would say the Dodgers because they understand that, hey, it's hard to be a Dodgers fan.
Yeah.
But you ask a Dodger fan who won the series of last year, I'm like, dude, don't
talk to me, dude.
Yeah, don't talk about the World Series.
I tell people, I'm like, look, fine, they don't have to give us a trophy, but don't keep it. Bro, it doesn't belong to you. You didn't deserve it.
Facts. Put it in like the Hall of Fame or something.
Exactly.
You know, the trophy that belongs to nobody.
Yeah, exactly. The trophy that belongs to nobody. Nick, just tell us, how did you actually get started with your music career? But more than that, just how did you get started with getting in love with music in general?
Sure. So I'm just going to preface this by saying I talk a lot. So if you just give me the side eye of like, bro, this guy needs to stop talking real quick. So I actually kind of got started in music like relatively late, and I say that in air quotes, because I didn't start caring about music until I was like 13, you know, which is not super late, but like a lot of my friends that play 4 years old, 5 years old, you know. So my grandpa tried to get us a jump start because my grandpa's a great musician. He was one of those guys that just played everything. He would pick up a flute, you know, and he would do something and he would nail it. You know what I mean? It's just a crazy guy. So he tried to get us, me and my brother, into like guitar lessons and piano lessons, and we just weren't having it. We weren't interested in it. It kind of felt like we were being forced to like something, and it wasn't happening. Wasn't until I was 12 years old, and for Christmas, my dad bought me and my brother Guitar Hero. And it was a world tour that had like the full drums and the full everything. So
is that the one that the guitar had the solo on the way up top?
This guy knows, dude. This guy knows.
I remember when I was like in middle school or high school, they're like, oh, you play guitar, you play bass, you can play Guitar Hero. And I tried it. It's not the same.
Crash and burn, dude. Crash and burn. So yeah, my birthday's in May. So I got that for Christmas. In the 5-6 months to my 13th birthday, I got to like expert mode. So I think it just naturally, like my inner instinct, I guess, for it that my grandpa had passed down, like kicked in. Yeah. So for my 13th birthday, my parents got me a drum set, and that was it, dude. Off and running. I tried. Okay, so this is kind of embarrassing. I don't tell this many people. In between me getting Guitar Hero and me actually getting my first drum set, I actually tried to audition for my church's worship team based on Guitar Hero drum knowledge and Guitar Hero drum knowledge alone. So I went to like the audition or just a rehearsal, I think it was. I was 12 years old, you know? And there was this guy, his name's Josh Becerra. Derek, the guy, keyboard player I was telling you about earlier, is his brother. Nasty drummer, dude. So I just went, like, took one look at him playing a 3-minute song and I walked out the door. I was like, no, that's not it. And then I went back like basically a year later after playing real drums for like 6 months, and yeah, I've been playing on that team pretty much ever since.
Those are the best stories.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's always the stories of like, hey, I didn't give up. I kept going and I kept understanding my craft and perfecting my craft and finally get to a place where I'm happy, or getting to that new audition or getting that new gig. Because ultimately it's a lot of work you probably had to put in, right?
Yeah, hours. Oh, my parents must have hated me, dude. Matt, like that's tough. Like of all the instruments to get your kid, like there has to be love in order to buy that kid a drum set. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm gonna get my kid an electric one with headphones. I don't want to hear
exactly,
you.
Exactly.
He's a smart guy.
Exactly.
I've had conversations with like my girlfriend when we get married and stuff, and I'm like, if we have a kid, if they want to play drums, it has to be an electric drum set, but I don't want them to play drums just because I know how loud it gets.
Don't let them do it. Don't let them do it.
But you can't force them, you know? If they love it, they love
Fact.
it.
And it's going to happen when it's going to happen, you know?
True.
Yeah.
So you went to MI,
Yeah.
right? Am I going too ahead?
No.
Tell us about that. How'd you end up there?
So initially after high school, I actually went to UC Davis. Basically, you know, got some scholarships and stuff. My original plan was to go up there for 2 years, study like music in and of itself, because I'm like a theory nerd. Like I really love music theory. So my goal was to go up there and get like just a better general understanding of music itself for the first 2 years, and then I was gonna transfer down here somewhere like CSUN or somewhere with an actual like performance program to spend the next 2 years kind of making those connections and developing and building in a social kind of way. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I did 1 year at Davis, and while I was just home for the summer, I got like an email. I don't know how they got my email from MI. And it was the first time I'd ever seen him, first time I've ever heard of him. And I was like, this is pretty like in line with what I want to do, you know? And it's kind of a more direct path, you know, in a shorter amount of time, in a more focused kind of situation. So after a lot of like debating, and I'm not going to say which parent, but one of my parents hated that I chose this initially.
They always do.
They always do. I got a lot of like, you know, this is great, but what's like your backup plan? You know what I mean? Which understandable. But so to answer your question long-windedly, MI was really good. I think in a general nutshell of an answer, you really do get out of it what you put into it. You know, I've seen a lot of people that go because they don't want to go to real college, you know? And there's not too much passion, but it is a kind of an easier way to get a degree, you know, and make mom and dad happy or whatever the cause was, you know? But if you like actually put in the hours and like kind of devote yourself to this thing, you know, then it is a great pathway.
Yeah, because I remember when I graduated high school, and I'm about to date myself, but in 2009, I know, right? Getting close to the 30s.
Ancient, dude.
I know, right? But I remember when I was getting out of high school, MI was a potential opportunity for me too.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I can either go to MI or I can even do LA recording studio.
Yeah.
And I remember that the caliber that you would get at MI, like just the professors that were there.
Yeah.
Were like amazing professors, and then even the fact that their etiquette on just how they teach and how like their requirements for you to join, like you couldn't just go to MI, like you had to take a like an interview,
you had to audition,
you had to be
both in person and then online, like you had to do both, you know.
And if you weren't good enough, they would actually turn you down.
Facts.
And I don't know about now, but I've heard that's kind of changed over the years.
A little bit.
Okay, but
no comment on that.
but one thing I do kind of want to touch on is when you were there in MI, how were your professors? Were they super strict with you? Were they kind of like, hey, you're here, I'm going to teach you what I know? Or were you kind of one of those students that said, you know what, I'm going to take every possibility, every outcome I can take to either perfect my craft or even to the point where I'm going to make connections or make networking events so that way it could help me in the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think this one also has a kind of a long answer too, so my bad.
No, go ahead.
But I think it's definitely a mixed bag because I have teachers that I'm still in touch with today. You know, I have this one teacher in specific, shout out to Albi Bonacci. When I finished MI, like he was kind of like one of those buddy teachers, you know, but he was elite. You know, this guy knew his stuff and he could execute his stuff on command, you know, but he's someone that you'd go, you know, grab a coffee with or whatever. When I finished MI and I was getting ready to actually launch into my career, he basically invited me over to his house and fixed up my drums for me, slapped on new heads, gave me like a pack of gels, a pack of like rings and stuff like that. And he gave me 4 drum cases, you know, which that alone will cost you $150, $200, you know? And this dude was just straight looking out for me. And like, I don't know if I would, it's small things like that, that if that hadn't happened, it could have changed the trajectory of my career, you know? There's other guys, like there's a guy named Jeff Bowders, like the definition of a powerhouse, just like personality wise, but you know, also playing. And he, when I was going through kind of doubts, which I'm sure we're probably going to get into a little bit later, he gave me like the piece of advice that it was very like blunt, but also kind of helped me cling on to it. He basically said, because I was 19, you know, and he was like, dude, you are so young. Like my recommendation to you, because he's been doing this for 20 years or whatever, was like, give it your all for the next 3 to 5 years. And if it doesn't work out, dude, you're 23. Like you're not even a quarter to a century, you know, like you're still mad young. You can do anything with your life at that point. But if this is something you're seriously passionate about, like make this everything, you know? And that's what I did. Like,
And how did you shift at that point? How did your mentality shift? Because obviously you were going through some doubts during that time.
Yeah.
And were there specific things that you decided to do from that point forward that would essentially catapult your career in the music industry?
Yeah, and it's a little bit depressing, but I basically had to not cut out, but like stop spending time with people that I genuinely enjoyed spending time with, but I knew that it would impede me from getting the most out of what I'm trying to do, you know? And those are like small sacrifices that like in the end I don't regret making those decisions, but it's disappointing that I had to make them, you know? So I think that conversation with Jeff like helped me realize what mattered and that there is like a timeline on it. Like if you're lazy on this, it's going to run away from you and you're going to miss an opportunity, you know? So I think in a sense, yeah, he just encouraged me to kind of be all in or be all out, dude.
Yeah, and I think that's huge because even in general, like my brother, I talk to my brother all the time, and I tell him like, hey, dude, like you're young, just do it, work hard. My brother right now, he's 25.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So he's young, right? I mean, 5 years younger than me, but still, in general, like your 20s are meant to be grinding.
Yeah,
like you're
facts.
like you're not gonna have the same type of, I don't know, like strength or stamina
yeah,
and resilience to just continue to doing that when you're 40 or 50 or 60.
Right. Yeah.
So the fact that you said like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna take these next 3 to 5 years and I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, and I'm gonna actually not shun people out, but decide to like, hey, not do X, Y, or Z because I want this so bad.
This is the focus. Yeah.
And you ended up doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's one of those small things that if that hadn't happened, you know, if those decisions hadn't been made, like it could affect the trajectory, like I said earlier, you know? Like for me, honestly, like I feel like, and I know people say this, and I don't think I have a big enough career to say this, but like, I think for me, a lot of things had to go right and a lot of right decisions had to be made. And I think a majority of them, like I'm grateful, you know, and appreciative that they were made. And I think that's one of those small decisions, you know, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
No, that completely makes sense. And when you were going through those tough decisions, did you ever feel alone? Or did you ever feel like, hey, like this is so far away, I am never going to reach where I want to be?
Yeah. And so I'll say this lightheartedly, but my 2 years at MI, and it has nothing to do with the school, not bad mouthing the school, guys, was the loneliest 2 years of my life. It was tough because like I was working a job. I was also working full time while I was going there, and I was working a job where I was spending like 40 to 50 hours a week sometimes at a desk by myself alone. You know, I would have class for an hour or two every day with other people, and then I would spend 3 to, depending on the day, 8 hours in my shed room, like alone practicing. You know, so I spent a majority of those 2 years
3 to 8 hours practicing.
Yeah.
Wow.
If I didn't work, I would be at school from 10 a.m. to about 8 p.m. Like those are my days, And when I did work, I would be there from like 10 to 2 and I would go work from 3 to 11 and get home by midnight. Do the same thing the next day.
I find it so funny how, like, there's people who think to get success, especially in like industries like this where everyone's trying to be, Jay-Z's drummer or something, or everyone wants to be at the top, but nobody wants to spend time, at the bottom.
Yeah, and I think Daniel Lopez from the first episode touched on it. Paying your dues, it's a huge thing. You have to, and it's hard to recognize that you have to do a lot of the jobs that people don't want to do. To build yourself and your relationships and your skill set and your experience just in the field in general. Because there's a lot of things that will come up like on a gig or in a situation that you kind of never think this would happen, but you have to learn and you have to gain that experience. And yeah, I think that's a textbook example of paying your dues.
Yeah, I actually remember one day when we were living together. You showed me your gear bag, like your bag that you take, and I remember I saw like random things in there, and I was like, "Why do you have this?" Oh, because one time I was at a gig, this happened, and I needed this, and no one had it, so I figured like from now on I'm going to carry this. And then why do you have the same difference? Like it was always like you learn so much of just being in the experience and just being in the just the dirt of everything, right? You're not going to always have a drum tech that's going to show up, set up the drums for you, and then you just show up and play, right?
And so I learned that. Another small shout out from I call him my boss, but he was just the owner of the RNRX company that I played for. He started the company a good 8 years ago, created all the rigs that we need. He is the master. His name's Ray. Shout out Ray. He's the master of over preparing. And I've seen time and time again where that proved necessary when nobody else thought it was. So not even just sticks, like, aside from the mallets and the shakers that I just constantly have on me, like I'll bring extra XLR cables. I'll bring extra headphone extensions. I'll bring extra headphones adapters, because you never know. And even at my church, like someone will be like, I forgot my inners. Do you have a backup pair? 100% I got a backup pair. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think though that, like you said, comes with experience, but it's always good to be the guy that has what you need. You know what I mean? Like it's always good. Yeah, we have this? Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I got it. You're that guy.
Yeah. I try to be.
Talk a little bit about the RNX experience. Like how was that? How did you grab that gig? Because was that the first gig that you got that was after you finished your graduation with MI?
Yeah, I would say it's my first quote unquote adult gig. Other than playing coffee shops, other than playing at other churches and stuff like that. But basically what happened was it was February of 2017. I graduated June of 2017 from MI. And, you kind of get to that point where you're at the end of your school time and you got to be looking ahead. What's going to happen? Like, I don't want to hit June and be like, okay, what now? So I think it was February. It was actually on a Facebook musicians page. And it was just this random guy, Ray Rodarte, posting like, hey, the initial gig was to play. They have every year a 23-day contract with the OC Fair. So they're playing every night of the fair. It's an amazing gig. They've had it for, I think, the 3 years prior. And we've done it every year since, well, except for this year. Shout out COVID. And so I auditioned and I feel like I did well, but I was so green. I was so fresh, like I didn't know if I was saying the right things. I didn't know if I was overplaying. I brought little charts and I didn't know if I was supposed to do that, just like simple things. So afterwards, shook the guy's hand, and there was also another woman there named Elaine. And then I got a call, I think probably 2 weeks later. There was a significant amount of space. It was Sunday morning. We had just finished church. I got a random call. I didn't have his number. And he basically said, like, you've got the job. And I feel like if there was ever a bigger influence on my career, like, I don't know what it would be other than Ray, because I was 20 years old at the time. I wasn't even old enough to play in bars, and he basically saw this kid and he gave me what I now consider to be the best compliment of my life. Was he basically said, like, you're malleable in the best way. Like you're moldable. You have no bad habits. So, you can be kind of, formed in the best possible way. And so, yeah, he basically like took me under his wing. I learned a lot about like business just from being around him. But essentially the group, and we haven't like talked about what the group is essentially live band karaoke. And I'm just going to say that sounds super lame. Every time I say it, I have to like either preface it or, afterwards say just like, it sounds lame, but it's one of the coolest things that I've ever been a part of. Like it really, I'm not sure if you've ever got a chance to experience it like in person.
I never got a chance to experience it in person.
Right.
Karaoke alone is fun. I can only imagine karaoke with a live band.
Yeah. And these guys, like these musicians are all MI. Well, most of them are MI graduates. Our guitar player, Stevie Garcia, he went to USC, studied jazz. So he's a nasty cat. You know what I mean? Like he just goes hard. I love those dudes. I still gig with them. I literally played a gig with them, I think a week ago. And that was 3 years ago that I met them all. So we did the OC Fair that year, and then that stemmed into an offer to come up and try a weekend in Reno at this casino. And I'm going to say this, and I'm pretty sure I'm like 80%, 85% sure I'm right. But we basically broke bar records that weekend that we were up there as far as how much money that bar made that weekend. So they basically asked us back the week after that, and the same thing happened. And so we were just basically there every week. It was super. It was one of the best experiences of my life, like hands down.
That's cool. And when you were there, obviously at the bar, you're around, situations that you can't kind of control, but there's some situations that you can control. Did you ever feel like you were put in a position where maybe you would say it wasn't ethical, or you felt like, like I shouldn't be in this position at this time?
Yeah. So there's a lot of, as you would imagine, peer pressure. And I'm of the belief that you're allowed to imbibe, you're allowed to partake. If, someone hands you a beer and it's after the show, like, okay, I'll slap it down. But obviously there's wisdom and, control and, moderation. So yes, I think that there have been many situations where it could have been potentially catastrophic. I believe that aside from like, my faith and like you said, morals and ethics, I believe that my boss, Ray, and his like singular work hunger and like ethics, basically like, WWJD, but mine was WWRD. Like what would Ray do in this situation? You know what I mean? So I think between the J and the R, like they were kind of the compass and the guide.
They made the junior.
They made
Mr. Nick, the junior.
There it is.
But one thing I do want to touch on is getting that gig on with RNRX. Obviously took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of time, a lot of gigs that you didn't want to play, but just because you needed to, right?
Right.
What would you say to the person that's currently maybe playing drums at their local church? Or what would you say to the person that's just saying, I want to do this for a living. Like I want to make this some form of income in my life.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person, or the younger Nick, or, just that person, that listener out there that's saying, hey, I want to do this?
Yeah, I would say, like I mentioned earlier, like my teacher, Jeff, said, like, no holds barred. Like if you're going to go for it, go for it. If you find yourself kind of, half-heartedly going at it, you could potentially, and again, I say this lightheartedly, be wasting years of your life. Like you could have had a very strong trajectory if that was your, if you really like, put everything into it. I would say the key is remember why you're doing it. If you ever have a moment where you're playing, let's just say you're playing on Sunday morning, or you're even playing in a garage with your friends or wherever, you're gonna have that moment where, this is so cheesy, but it's gonna feel like you're flying, and you have to, like, I have a moment in my head and in my heart that if I ever feel like this is a drag, that I ever feel like I've played this song 17,000 times, you know, like, why do I want to keep doing this? Like, you have to remember that moment. Because playing that residency, yeah, there were times where we played the same song 2 or 3 times a night for in the 8th month or whatever. You know what I mean? We were playing 4 nights a week there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would find myself spacing out, or if the TV was on, I'd be tuning in to check the Dodgers smash the Giants. Because that's usually the case. And yeah, you kind of have to refer back to that moment, and that moment hopefully reinvigorates you. You know, like it just kind of like just revitalizes you, and it's almost like the metaphor of keeping your eye on the prize. Like, that is your prize, and if you ever stray away from it, like, that's your North Star. You know, in a nutshell, like, stick to those guns. You know, because that's going to be your light in the darkness. You know, when it gets tough and it gets overbearing and it gets scary, like, remember why you're doing this, and remember that you can do it. You know?
So when talking about like your why, you know, as artists, it's probably the most roller coaster of, I don't even call it career, most hobbies, yeah. But it's probably a roller coaster of emotions, of feelings, of doubt, like you mentioned earlier, because essentially we're creating something, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're so scared to show it or whatnot. But did you ever have moments where, you know, you want to throw in the towel, or, you know, you were like kind of questioning why am I even doing this, or anything like that? Yeah.
So in going to MI, so I was basically on like drums. I was self-taught for the first 6 years, which is great, but it also means that you pick up a lot of bad habits, you know, that I didn't know were bad habits. So I got to MI, and they were basically like, unlearn 90% of what you know so that we can help you learn it again the right way.
Wow.
You know, and that's tough. That's tough to hit a drum, literally just strike a drum the same way for 6 years, and then being like, no, you're doing it wrong. You know, that's tough. There's a thing on drums called like a rim shot, which is basically, you know, when you're hitting a snare, you're hitting the center of the drum, but you're also hitting the body of the stick on the rim. And you basically have to have like precision so that you're not hitting one too early or too late. When I got to MI, everybody knew how to do that. I had never heard of it. So I basically was stressing out already, you know, upon arrival, because everybody's at point, you know, Z, and I'm still over here at like G. You know what I mean? Because I can't even play a rim shot. So I think being in that environment of people that are just so talented, you know, and also seeing the different growth rates, you know, can be both encouraging and discouraging, you know, and that really depends on your outlook. I think when I felt my lowest, it was because I had a discouraging view of it. You know, I would see these people that could do things that I didn't even understand what they were doing. You know, I had this one guy named Steven who's from New York, and he grew up playing jazz, and we would just jam together, and he would be playing in quintuplets. You know, we know 4 notes per quarter note. He was playing 5, like no big deal, you know, and that's nuts. But I think it's also people like him, shout out Steven too, like that were encouraging enough that it helped me change my view on it. You know, like, okay, I know Steven couldn't do that at one point, you know, and he can now. And he definitely did something to enable him to do that. Why can't I? Why don't I? Why shouldn't I? Let's do it. You know?
That's so good.
Yeah, there's a lot of great musicians that came out of MI. Matias Asado is another
nasty,
one.
Yeah,
that guy's
Tori Kelly.
nasty.
Dude, I don't know what they feed that guy.
Oh, man. I don't think he was born this planet.
Probably wasn't. I don't know. Brazil, I feel like Brazil has so much talent. He's a Brazilian. So
yeah, they go hard.
They go hard, man. They go hard. But just talking about being an artist, at a certain point, I'm sure that playing the songs over and over and over again and over and over again, like,
and 17 more times, yeah.
17 more times after that. A lot of times you start getting a lot of creative juices that you might say, you know what, I want to create something. So you've recently released something, right?
Yeah, so a band that I play for called Atticus Finch. They've put out a couple albums over the years, but yeah, they just released a EP called View from Higher Ground. Came out, I believe, January 31st, if I'm not mistaken. I'm super proud of that album. But I think the thing that's craziest about that album is because obviously it happened during COVID. And a lot of those guys live in New York. So we basically put that album together being 3,000 miles apart. You know, my best friend Jordan lives here in the States. I think you've met Jordan.
I've met Jordan. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Great dude.
Amazing. He actually let me borrow his Nintendo Switch. And
He let me
borrow.
Wait, that Switch doesn't belong to you?
No.
Awkward.
Jordan, I hope you're not listening to this.
But
you were 3,000 miles apart.
yeah, so we basically ended up all recording our parts individually. They would send me like a stem of like a guitar part. Like when I tracked a lot of that album, it was here's a guitar and a scratch vocal of me in the bathroom. You know what I mean? And it was kind of like, yeah, working on getting those creative juices flowing. And I'm mad proud of the way that this album turned out. Like
That's crazy that you could do that
it's
nowadays.
so nuts, dude.
It's wild.
You weren't able to do that a couple of years ago.
Big facts, dude.
20
Big
years
facts,
ago,
yeah.
you weren't able to do that. That's
Technology, man.
I know. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's weird.
Yeah, we actually did I brought in the new decade, 2020, on tour with them in New York. And I would think I was driving through, I don't know, like Syracuse when the 12 o'clock struck, you know? I was eating like a freaking chicken sandwich from their spot Stewart's. Like if you guys are from New York, you know Stewart's. But yeah, they're just a good group of dudes and they write some killer jams, man. I recommend checking it out. And I'm not just saying that.
Yeah, and where can they listen to that?
Yeah, so it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, all streaming platforms. View from Higher Ground. Yeah, and again, the band's called Atticus Finch. Listen after the podcast. Don't stop the podcast.
So you gave a shout out to our boy COVID.
Yo, the homie.
How has COVID, affected your career, all your jobs, your projects?
So hugely, but not devastatingly. So I am still teaching. The place that I teach at mainly, they stopped for like about a month and then they resumed via Zoom. And I guess people weren't super into it. But it's a pretty small location. So they were like, you know what, we can do this responsibly. Everybody's required to wear face shields, XYZ requirements. So I think they've been open now for like 5-6 months. Everybody's been super safe. Great people. I have been doing a lot more recording, which is cool. I'm lucky enough to live at a spot where the person that I live with has like a studio. He converted his garage into a studio, and I'm talking like soundproof, dude.
Like legit.
I've played drums at 3 a.m. No problems, no
That's
complaints. Awesome. It's amazing. I'm so happy. But yeah, so I've been recording for another group I play with called 9 Mile Station, led by a guy named Will Hawkins, really cool guy. We actually just released a song. It's essentially like a cover of Tom Petty's The Waiting, which is a great song with a little like twist at the end that references kind of our climate as musicians right now. So go check it out again after the podcast, after you've listened to the complete View from Higher Ground. The Waiting, the group is called 9 Mile Station. I was like literally just in the studio with them. Today's Tuesday, so they're still working on stuff. Like he basically told me, he's a really wise band leader, that guy Will. And he basically told me back in April or May, he was like, right now, like the lights, metaphorically, the lights are down on a lot of musicians right now. And what you're doing right now, you're either like building or you're kind of diminishing. And when the lights come back on, you better be buff. You know what I mean? You better have put that work in because they're going to be off and running, So he really has kind of kept the reins going on that band. So they've just been putting in work, studio sessions, social media and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say those are kind of the biggest situations right now.
Yeah, that's a good analogy though. Like when the lights turn back on, you better be buff.
That guy is super smart, man.
No, it's true.
It's big facts. You don't want to be caught slipping when the lights come back on.
Yeah, like if you're not putting in the work right now, because there's so many ways that you can essentially be putting out content, even you know, technology like we were just mentioning can do that. But
even like building your skill set, you know, like one of my buddies that just got married in Tucson, shout out Chris Lamb. When COVID hit, he was one of the worship leaders at my church, and then he got an offer in Arizona. But as soon as COVID hit, he basically got Ableton, which he knew nothing about, you know, the DAW system Ableton. And he spent a month doing nothing else. Like, I mean, nothing else but learning Ableton. And now he's better at DAWs than me. You know what I mean? And I've been working with DAWs, like I work with Logic, but still for like 3 years, you know? And that guy's, so that's what I mean. Like, he went hard when the lights were down. And now that to him in Arizona, lights are up, you know, he's going hard. He's really blessed out there.
That's all you got to do, man. Like, that's
literally just put in that work.
Yeah. And you know, the funny thing is that a lot of people say, like, I just don't have the time. I got bills to pay. Like, hey, you know what? Everyone else does too.
Yeah.
We're all on the same boat.
We're all in the same boat. We all have 24 hours in a day. It's
especially if you live in LA. Come on. How many jobs you got? You know what I mean?
Bro.
Yeah.
Bro, it's so true.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity, and it's just how you spend your time. Everyone has the same amount of time. It's just how you decide, hey, this is of importance to me versus this. What's next in your career? Obviously right now, COVID, but are you working on any projects right now that are thinking of? Are you thinking about starting any new projects yourself? Are you looking into producing? What's going on? What's next?
So right now, actually, a lot of my focus is on my church, like for me. So we've actually been working on kind of writing and kind of creating content for ourselves to put out. So me and one of my worship buddies, Jesse Bonilla, we've kind of been having like not semi-weekly kind of meetings where we just kind of hash out ideas, you know. I'm really excited about that. 9 Mile Station, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty up and running right now. We've got kind of stuff lined up for the next, I think, 6 months, as far as like kind of little releases here and there, little promos here and there, little situations coming. I'm still teaching. I also teach like piano lessons and theory lessons. So just kind of branching out, like you have to basically diversify incomes, they call it. You know what I mean? Are
you expensive? I've been trying to learn the piano for a while now.
Let's just say $3 million an hour. I'm just kidding. Now we'll work something out, bro. Hit me up.
I'll shoot the text.
I love teaching, dude. Like, I think it's so exciting. People, you know, kind of can tend to view it as a drag. But for me, like, when you can help someone like hit that light bulb moment where it clicks, that's the best feeling in the world. Because I remember having those feelings, you know, when you're playing drums and you're learning a new sticking pattern and you're like, okay, what if I do this? Oh man. And it opens doors. You know what I mean? It's a game changer. And I love helping like people, you know, kids and older, like figure that out, you know, and get to that point.
This one's more for me, but
it's a personal question. It's a personal.
But would you say that like, is it possible? Well, of course it's possible, but would you highly recommend a musician to, you know, go to school for music and like dedicate that time, whether it's college or an institute, or would you say that it's you know, pretty highly possible to still make it, I guess, in the industry without school?
Great question. I feel like the answer to that question is ever changing. I think that it's a case by case basis. Because there is definitely a bunch of stuff that I learned in school that I never would have gotten anywhere else. But I also have a buddy who, you know, he basically found himself just the right teacher outside of school. And this teacher ended up becoming, he's a guy named Brian Fraser Moore. He plays drums for Justin Timberlake. You know, so now this buddy that I knew, like, he's the drum tech for Justin Timberlake and for Alicia Keys, you know? So I think that there's no like easy answer. There's no one way. I personally, if you're all in, would recommend it because there are so many nuances to your craft, whether it's drums, whether it's guitar, whether it's whatever, that make the biggest difference. Like I said, like I had mentioned earlier, like I thought I knew how to hit a drum, and it turns out there's 4 different ways just to strike a drum. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But those things influence my playing. When I'm, playing at church or playing wherever, like I'm thinking about those nuances, and it affects the way that I play. It affects the way that things come across. It's good for like, kind of playing a little bit more emotionally, because you have a better understanding and range to be able to do so. And that, I think, are things that are pretty hard to learn outside of like an official education, outside of a place that's equipped to teach you that. So for me, like if I didn't know the difference between a full stroke and an upstroke, like, I don't know if I would be the drummer that I am today or just the musician that I am today. I also think going to school is super clutch for like developing relationships, because that's at the end of the day, you can be the baddest drummer, but if you're playing in your bedroom and nobody knows who you are,
nobody's heard you,
you're staying in the bedroom,
How it goes. Yeah. You know what's crazy is I'm not a drummer, and I think I told you this once, Andrew. There's actually some drummers that I've thought to like myself and Andrew, because he's like my conscience, that like they've it's too late for them, which I know it's not, but I'm like, wow, they've learned to play the drums this certain way that it's too late for them to learn it the correct way. Like they've been playing like this for years. Like there was a drummer that like didn't use his wrists, he used his whole like arm, and
wood
I was
choppers,
like,
baby,
and
wood choppers.
I'm like, look, I'm not a drummer, but I know that doesn't look right.
Yeah, yeah. The big facts. So, and again, I say this delicately, and it's going to touch back to earlier when I said that my best compliment that I've ever received was being malleable, is being teachable, And I think and this is a generalization, the only struggle with people that are a little bit older is that they might not be as open to changing what they know, because it is possible. It's 100% possible. One of my students is 44 years old, and he started like 2 years ago, and he's great. Now he's like in one of like our ensemble bands that we have at this place. He's a great guy.
That's cool.
But I think it really comes down to how serious you are, because if you're serious about learning and getting better, you're going to make yourself available, and make yourself become teachable and mendable, moldable, or whatever that adjective is. So I think it really is on your outlook, because it's 100% possible. Like it's as simple as understanding that there is a better way and wanting to learn that, But if somebody's not willing to, then, the road stops there.
Well, Nick, you're a fantastic drummer.
Thanks,
how much of the success that you've had so far, and the awesome opportunities that you've had, how much of that would you attribute to hard work, or how much would you attribute to God's favor or blessing?
I knew you were going to ask this question. It's a toughie. I think that obviously it's a combination of both. I grew up playing in the church. So like I'd mentioned, I bombed that first audition or whatever. And then I went back when I was 13 and I joined the youth team. And I think I joined the adult team when I was like 15 or something. And I'm 24 now. I'm at the same church. It's changed a little bit, but same church, same building. And so it's been a constant. It's been a constant in my playing. I think that as far as the faith, it comes from the wisdom that he provides. You know what I mean? To know that you have to put in that hard work. To know that this is not going to come easy. You can't half but this, And I think trusting that there is a plan, is a big one. I would say if you had to break it down percentage, probably 60-40 faith, there is a lot of work that needs to get done and a lot of hours you have to put in. And I think for me personally, like having that church background and that church wisdom and that, church quote unquote maturity, allowed me to kind of tackle that in the right way, if that makes sense.
It's actually a really good way to put it.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, pass the test, guys.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, but where can people find you?
So my social media, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Well, they can find me on the corner of
here's my address. So my social media is, I really only have Instagram at this point, but it's Nick Moran, NickMoran drums. If you don't know how to spell drums, then we'll have another conversation. No, but it's Nick Moran drums. Yeah.
You're probably too young to have an Instagram.
Facts, big facts. Yeah, that's me, guys. My cell phone number is. I'm just kidding.
He's taking everyone.
Yeah, true.
He's taking.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Nick. And we wish you the best in your career.
Absolutely. You guys too with this podcast. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.